Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our driver ratings for the Canadian Grand Prix. And what a race that was. Fantastic stuff. All the reaction to the race, and if you want to go back to qualifying or even the preview, that is available on the channel, so make sure you check all that out. But it is time to give each driver a score between 1 and 10. Before we get into it, make sure you subscribe, of course, and leave a like, because, that's probably helpful, apparently. Let's get into this, though, starting with the Haases. And the Haas, firstly, of Kevin Magnussen. And at one point in this race, I was 100% sure that Kevin Magnussen was going to win. He qualified 14th. By the end of the 5th lap, I think it was, he was 4th, going a second and a half quicker than anyone else on the wet tyres whilst everyone else was on the inters. Fantastic stuff from Kevin Magnussen at the start. Unfortunately, Haas then messed up the pit stop. Now, I haven't heard anything really said about this yet. My interpretation of it was a late call from Magnussen to dive into the pits, and that's why they weren't necessarily ready straight away. I haven't heard anything different, so that's what I'm going to assume happened. But from there, he managed the race pretty well, despite this setback, and continued to do pretty good. In the end, he finished 12th, just outside the top 10. I'm going to give him a 9, though, just because I think overall, great race from Magnussen, and that start is legendary. When we talk about wet starts, we always talk about Senna, Donington, 1993, where he gets past like 5 cars to take the lead of the race. And, that was Senna in a McLaren, which was probably the second best car that year. This was Kevin Magnussen in a Haas. I'm not saying it's better, but I'm putting the conversation out there. Is Kevin Magnussen better than Ayrton Senna? Who's to say? But we're starting a dialogue. For those of you who don't understand, that's a joke. Apparently I need to say that now because there's a lot of people who think my Iron Man video is serious. Anyway, here's Kevin Magnussen. Not Kevin Magnussen, this is Nico Hülkenberg. He qualified 17th, also started on the wets, also made a good start. Not as good as that of Magnussen. They left him out for ages, and he built up this huge gap. Really didn't help him whatsoever. He did come in eventually. He would finish the race in 11th, ahead of his teammate. Yet again, though, just outside the top 10. But still, a fantastic race from Nico Hülkenberg. I'm going to give him a 9 as well. Fantastic job from both of the Haas lads. Despite coming away pointless, still a wonderful, wonderful job from both of them. Here's someone who didn't do a wonderful job. It is Zhou Guanyu. He qualified last, and he was the last of the guys to finish. Zhou Guanyu is having an awful year, and it's going relatively unnoticed because he finishes races. I think he's finished every race this year, unless I'm forgetting something. But he crashed twice in the practice sessions, qualified dead last, and then was the last of the finishers. I'm giving him a 3, and I think that's quite generous. Across to Valtteri Bottas now. Here he is, looking magnificent. Now, as much as Zhou Guanyu is having a bad year, I think Valtteri Bottas is actually having quite a good year. He's getting that Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber car into positions that it really shouldn't. And on the surface of it now, it looks like he might not have a drive next year. I had always put him and Williams together, and there was that rumour a few weeks ago that he was seen in the Williams hospitality unit, but they're putting all their chips now in on Carlos Sainz. So it makes you think, where will Valtteri Bottas end up? Could he maybe have another year in the Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber team? I wouldn't mind seeing him Haas, but apparently that is going the way of Esteban Ocon. It's a difficult one for Valtteri Bottas at the minute, who is doing well and coming away with nothing. Still not scored any points this year, but I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10 for this race here. I think he did pretty well. I could move it to an 8. He started 19th, he finished 13th. And he did a hell of a lot better than Joe. I'm giving him an 8, not a 78, my goodness. Just an 8 out of 10. for Valtteri Bottas. Who's next? Oh, it's Yuki Tsunoda. Now, this is a very difficult one. So, Yuki, he qualifies 8th. Great qualifying. At the start of the race, he's on the inters, and he is one of the few people who didn't pit for a second set of inters. He made those inters last through the rain, into the dry, and then back into the rain again, and then pit. He would eventually, though, have a big moment near the end of the race, nearly took out Nico Hülkenberg, and that cost him everything. He was about 8th or 9th at the time, but would finish the race in 14th. So he did fantastically until he didn't, and that is always very difficult to score. But it's going to have to be a 4 for Yuki Tsunoda, just because all that good work he did in the end meant nothing because of a mistake that he did, and there was nothing really else to say about it. A tough final result there for Yuki Tsunoda, but it wasn't a tough one for his teammate, Daniel Ricciardo. My goodness, he had his best weekend in quite some time. Ricciardo qualified 5th, finished the race in 8th. I'm giving him a 10 out of 10. It's good points here for the Racing Bills. They had a good race overall, fantastic qualifying. To get that car into the top 5, I thought was absolutely fantastic. You know, beating the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz. To be in the top 5 in that car, very good. And then converting that into good points, despite the fact that he had a 5-second penalty for a false start, which when they showed the replay, looked like a normal start. Apparently maybe he was rolling a little bit before, but, from the human eye, it looked basically bang on. That being said, they have introduced those new rules about the false starts. But yeah, pretty harsh penalty for him. But still, to come away in 8th place at the end of the day, getting good points for the team, fantastic stuff. Hopefully, he can continue it onwards throughout the rest of the year and continue to get good points. And then we have to have the discussion of Ricciardo versus Lawson for that final seat. Because, it's been a mixed one for Daniel Ricciardo. And I'm hoping he can carry on to get these good performances in. Who's next? It is... Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong screen. It's Logan Sargent. Okay. Very good qualifying. Qualified 13th, which I think might be one of his better qualifyings ever. I know he did get into Q3 in the Netherlands last year, but yeah, still 13th, very good for Logan there. And in the race, he wouldn't finish because he spun and hit the wall. So despite a good qualifying, it is still going to be a 4. Just because he really didn't go anywhere in the race, not much pace at all, and then was just in the wall of his own fault. So I think a 4 is more than fair. His teammate, though, there you go, that one, Alexander Albon. His race ended the same way, but very different story. So he qualified 10th, good qualifying for him. And then his race ended because Carlos Sainz just collected him as he was spinning. Not much he could do there. Really quite unfortunate. He was in a good position at that time. It's a tough one, but I'm going to give him a 5. I mean, I could give him a 6, but I feel like it's a bit hard to give someone a 6 when they didn't finish the race. Especially when... Actually, no. I'm going to give him a 6. Actually, I feel like giving him a 7 because of that double overtake. That double overtake was something incredibly special, and I think deserves a high score. He's gone from a 5 to a 7. He didn't even finish the race. But that double overtake on the outside of Ricciardo, then on the inside of Gasly, was magnificent and deserves a 7 out of 10. Let's go to Alpine now. And it's, wow, I was going to say it's good things about Alpine. But something that wasn't necessarily picked up in the race, and has come out afterwards, is Esteban Ocon's god-awful mood. So he qualified 18th, would finish the race in 10th, very good race for him. But then it's come out yet again. This happens quite a bit in Alpine. He was asked to move aside for his teammate. He said no. He then waited far too long. Let his teammate through on the promise that that Gasly would then let him back through at the end of the race. Gasly didn't let him back through at the end of the race, and the race ended. More drama between the teammates at Alpine. Firstly, I'm going to give him a 10 because he scored points in the Alpine, and I think that's great. And I think they're in a good place at the minute. But yeah, it's another teammate issue for Ocon. And if it was as simple as Alpine say to him, let Gasly through, we'll let you back at the end of the race, and then he lets him through, and then they don't let him back, then I'm on Team Ocon all day long. But at the end of the day, they said let him through, and he just wasted so much time. And by the time that he let him through, Gasly was never going to do anything in the first place. So, on one hand, I can understand it from Ocon's point of view, because obviously Alpine have dropped him for next year, or at least that's how it's being shown from the outside. It could very much be that Ocon's walked away. So I can understand him not necessarily wanting to play the team game at this point. But yeah, it's a tough one, because this just keeps on happening at Alpine, and it keeps on happening with Esteban Ocon. Just consistently through his career are these teammate issues that happen time and time and time again and never really go away. And it makes me think of Jacques Villeneuve, because he said something very interesting this weekend, which is quite rare for him. But it was in discussion of Kevin Magnussen in, I think it was on FP2 or something. Crofty said that Kevin Magnussen does not feel at fault for the Monaco crash of him and Perez. And Jacques Villeneuve said that because Kevin Magnussen refuses to accept responsibility for these incidents, he never learns from them and never grows from them, and they keep on happening again. And I feel like the exact same thing is happening with Ocon and his teammate issues. He has consistently had run-ins with his teammates or crashes with his teammates all the way through his career, but never ever accepts responsibility for them and never can see his own fault in them. And due to that, he never learns from them because he just thinks, it was their fault. And it just happens again and again and again. And if he's going to Haas next year with Ollie Behrman, it's going to be him and a rookie teammate with quite a lot to prove, and that is just going to be fireworks between the two of them. And I don't want that to happen because I want Ollie Behrman to do well. Despite all this ranting about Esteban Ocon, I've given him a 10 out of 10 because he scored points in the Alpine, but I feel like giving him a 9. I'm giving him a 9. It's my rating. I can do what I want. 9 out of 10 for Esteban Ocon. You know who I'm going to give 10 to, though? His teammate, Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly, great weekend for him. Started 15th, finished 9th. This is the highest finishing position for an Alpine, I think, so far this year. They're in a much better place than they were a few races ago, and I think Gasly did a great job. If Ocon had let him through a few laps earlier, who knows? Maybe he could have got on the back of Ricciardo and got even more points. But a great job nonetheless. Let's go to the Astons now. And this is easily Aston's best weekend all year. So they turned up this weekend and really just looked like they were competitive from the off. In the end, Lance Stroll qualified 9th, finished the race in 7th. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. Great job from Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso, though, even better. Fernando Alonso qualified 6th, finished the race in 6th. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. He spent most of the race keeping Hamilton behind him. Hamilton, who was in a much faster car. The Mercedes, you could very strongly argue, was the fastest car on the track this weekend. It was between the Mercedes and the McLaren for me, for who had the best car. And Alonso did a fantastic job of keeping Hamilton behind him all the way through the first half of the race. The only reason Hamilton got past is because of another slow stop for Aston. So Aston's pit crew really letting down Alonso here, who did a fantastic job and got some very, very good points. Who's next? Oscar Piastri is next. So Piastri qualifies 4th, finished the race in 5th. Going to give him an 8 out of 10. Like I said in the race reactions, this race really, for me, proved that Piastri is very good, but he's not quite on that level of the top guys. And, it's only his second year, so I don't expect it to be on that level. But, when you have a race here, and it was towards the end, Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, Russell, Hamilton, Piastri was very much out of place with those guys. And, he did a decent job defending against Russell. And also, Russell hit him. We'll get on to that in a little bit. But, yeah, it was very much like Piastri was not really in the same league as those other guys. He will get there eventually, I'm 100% sure of it. But he's not quite there yet. Someone who is there, though, is Lando Norris. Had a fantastic race. Qualified third, finished second. 10 out of 10. That portion of the race near the start where it starts drying up and he's on those inter tyres and he was just so quick. Absolutely fantastic from him. The moves on Verstappen and Russell, he just made it look easy. In the end, had to settle for second place, but nonetheless, a fantastic job from him to get that P2. Really, really good weekend for McLaren. And Lando Norris. Was not a good weekend for Ferrari and Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz qualifies 12th, doesn't finish the race. I'm going to give him a 3. The Ferrari, don't know what happened here. In FP1, FP2, it looked like they had some speed. But then when it came to actually qualifying and the actual race itself, just absolutely nothing. Real shocking stuff. The Ferraris were just never really in contention for the entire race, really. Even when they were running, they weren't running, I don't think, in the points. Or even if they were 9th or 10th. And yeah, Sainz not only spinning and ruining his own race, but collecting Albon in the process as well and taking him out. So bad weekend all around. It got even worse, though, for Charles Leclerc. Real bad weekend for him. Qualified 11th, also did not finish the race. Suffering from an engine issue basically from the start. Awful pit stop call to go to the dry tyres just as it started to rain again. And they called him in far too late in that safety car period. So the point was, when the safety car gets going again, he's not even at the back of the pack. Very bad strategy call from there. Then the car started working again because they reset it in the pit stop. But yeah, he was just so far off the back of the pack and they just retired the car to save some miles on the engine. Nothing he could do, really, in terms of the race, because the strategy just ruined it for him. I'm going to give him a 4 overall. George Russell is a very interesting one. So he gets pole position, leads the race for quite a lot of the start of it, then ends up in third, when realistically, he should have won this race. He had it on pole, he had arguably the fastest car on the track, and he was third, and really should have been fourth. He got away with that incident with Piastri. There was no penalty for it. But, we've seen bigger penalties handed out for lesser things, such as Australia, where Alonso hit the brakes in front of him, and then he crashed by himself. That was a 5-second penalty for Alonso. But here, when he hits Piastri, leaving Piastri nowhere to go, that's not a penalty. And that's because despite the fact that the FIA say that they give out penalties based on what happens, not the outcome, I don't believe that to be true. If he had hit Piastri and Piastri had been sandwiched in the wall and Piastri's out of the race, that's definitely a penalty for George Russell. He's lucky that Piastri was okay. Because realistically, George Russell on his pace should have finished fourth. He threw away an easy second place because he cut the grass and gave the position back to Norris. He threw it away even earlier than that. When I think he went for a move on Norris, or was it Norris went on a move for him, then he cut the final corner and he just left the door wide open for Max, not before nearly hitting Max as well. Then there was the incident with Piastri as well. Just mistake after mistake after mistake for George Russell in this race. And despite that, finishes third. It's a real tough one because he should have won and he didn't. So despite him finishing third, I'm going to have to give him like a 7 because there was just too many mistakes in this race for him to get a higher score than that. And it annoys me because he should have done a hell of a lot better. Someone who did do well, though, was his teammate Lewis Hamilton. I said he did well. Did not do well in qualifying. Very disappointing. He was quick all the way through FP3, quick all the way through qualifying. Then when it actually matters, he qualified 7th, whilst his teammate is on pole position. For a lot of the race, he was struggling behind Alonso, as I said. But once he got past Alonso, the speed he had from there was fantastic. He would finish the race in 4th. That move he did on Russell near the end was a great one as well. I really thought he was going to get on the podium here, his first podium of the year. But alas, no, it was P4, but I am going to give him an 8. Despite the fact that he finished lower than Russell, he made a hell of a lot less mistakes in the race itself, and I think deserves that 8. But if you think 7's a bad score, here's Sergio Perez. Where do we start here? My God. So, I was happy for Sergio to get the contract extension because I like him. He's one of my favourite guys in the last few years, especially his time in Force India Racing Point. I thought he was absolutely incredible. And the first year or so of Red Bull, I thought he was really good as well. But my God, I don't understand how he's got that contract extension when you have someone like Yuki Tsunoda also available. If I was in charge of Red Bull, I would much rather take the risk of giving Yuki Tsunoda the Red Bull seat than give Sergio Perez 2 more years. Because we have seen this exact race play out for Sergio Perez countless amount of times over the last few years. He qualified awfully, then was nowhere all race, then he crashed. How many times have we seen that from Sergio Perez? It happens all the time. So he qualified 16th. He was out-qualified by Logan Sargent for the second time in a row. In the race itself, as I said, was nowhere. Then hit a damp patch, spun round and destroyed his front wing. He's also now been given a grid penalty because the FIA is saying he should have pulled over instead of driving the car in an unsafe condition to go back to the pits. Sergio Perez gets a 1 out of 10, and that's because he turned up. Here's Max Verstappen. He had a great weekend. I honestly think this is one of Max's best ever wins. The Red Bull was nowhere near the quickest car on the track this weekend, but he matches the pole time and has to settle for P2, manages the race really well, yes, all the way through, sticks behind Russell near the start. He made a mistake, that is true, and that cut him back down to be right behind Norris, but yet again managed it really well from there. 2 safety car restarts that he did incredibly to have over a second gap after the first lap. Really good stuff from there, and then he goes on to win the race. It's one of his best wins in a very, very long time, and you can tell this race in Imola. When he won over the radio, you can tell how much he enjoyed it in his voice compared to some of his wins he's had in the past year or so, where it was very much like a fundamental win. This was a great one for him. He's getting a 10 out of 10. So there you go. There is the driver ratings for Canada. The highest scorers are Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly and Daniel Ricciardo. Lowest scorer, Sergio Perez. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll be back on Friday for a whole new video, and then on Saturday I'll be here for the weekly news roundup. Until then, though, have a good one. I'll see you then. Goodbye.